Imagine standing on the shores of Lake Michigan, looking up at a $1.8 billion masterpiece of glass and steel that was supposed to redefine the Chicago skyline. It is sleek, it is modern, and it is currently fighting a war against the very ground it stands on. In the world of high-rise construction, Chicago is the ultimate proving ground, the birthplace of the skyscraper. But even this city of legendary architects is currently staring at a disaster that defies belief. This massive tower was built on top of a foundation that engineers now admit was compromised from the very first pour. And today that $1.8 billion investment is quite literally cracking under the pressure. From the high-end penthouses to the underground parking garages, the signs of structural fatigue are manifesting in ways that have sent shockwaves through the global engineering community. This isn't just about a few hairline fractures in the drywall. This is about deep, structural fissures in the load-bearing columns that support thousands of tons of weight. Today, we are going deep into the belly of this failing megaproject to uncover how a billion-dollar mistake was allowed to happen in the most famous architectural city in America, and what happens when the Windy City's newest icon begins to fall apart from the bottom up. To understand why this tower is in so much trouble, we have to look at the unique challenge of building in Chicago. Beneath the beautiful parks and bustling streets lies a layer of soft, wet clay that engineers affectionately call Chicago blue. It is a remnant of the last ice age, and it is notoriously difficult to build on. To support a tower of this size, you can't just dig a hole and pour concrete. You have to drive massive steel caissons hundreds of feet down into the earth until they hit solid bedrock. This process is expensive, it is time-consuming, and it is where the first corners were allegedly cut on this $1.8 billion project. According to internal documents and whistleblower reports, a significant number of these caissons were not properly seated on the bedrock. Instead of a solid connection, they were resting on a layer of compacted gravel and mixed till. The developers were under immense pressure to keep the project on schedule, and they reportedly ignored the warnings that the foundation wasn't as stable as the blueprints required. The results of that decision are now becoming visible to the naked eye. The tower has begun to experience what engineers call differential settlement, but on a scale that is rarely seen in modern construction. One side of the building is sinking faster than the other, causing the entire structure to tilt by several inches. Now, in a shorter building, 3 inches might not be a deal breaker, but when you are talking about a super tall skyscraper, every fraction of an inch at the base translates into several feet of sway at the top. The building is being twisted like a giant piece of licorice. This twisting motion is putting immense stress on the internal framework, and that stress is searching for a way out. It finds that exit in the form of cracks. The residents of the building were the first to notice that something was wrong. It started with subtle things: doors that would no longer latch, windows that seemed to whistle even when they were tightly closed, and the occasional sound of a loud bang that echoed through the hallways in the middle of the night. At first, the management company told everyone it was just the building settling, a common euphemism used to calm nervous tenants. But then the cracks appeared. We are talking about deep, jagged fissures running through the concrete floors of the mechanical rooms. In some areas, the marble tiles in the lobby began to pop off the walls, as if they were being pushed by an invisible hand. When the structural reports finally leaked, it became clear that this wasn't just aesthetic settling. The building's core was actually beginning to fail. The financial nightmare behind this project is just as complex as the engineering failure. A $1.8 billion skyscraper is never just owned by one person. It is a massive web of investors, banks, and insurance companies. When the news of the failing foundation hit the industry, the value of the building plummeted. Suddenly, the luxurious apartments that were supposed to sell for millions of dollars became toxic assets. No bank will mortgage a home in a building that has a documented structural deficiency. This has left the developers in a desperate situation. They can't sell the remaining units, they can't afford the massive cost of a foundation retrofit, and they can't walk away because of the billions in personal and corporate guarantees. They are trapped in a failing tower of their own making. One of the most concerning aspects of this Chicago failure is the grouting strategy that was used to try and fix the problem quietly. Instead of admitting the foundation was failing and halting construction, the project managers allegedly began a massive, secretive operation to pump thousands of gallons of high-pressure chemical grout into the soil beneath the tower. The idea was to create an artificial rock that would stabilize the sinking caissons. This is a common repair technique, but in a building this heavy, it's like trying to fix a flat tire on a moving truck with a can of spray foam. It might hold for a few months, But eventually, the sheer weight of the skyscraper will compress that grout or push it out of the way. According to independent soil analysts, the grouting has actually made the situation worse by changing the drainage patterns beneath the building, causing the soft clay to shift even more unpredictably. Let's talk about the physics of the crack itself. When a skyscraper's foundation is compromised, the building's weight is no longer distributed evenly. This means certain steel beams and concrete columns are carrying twice or even 3 times the load they were designed for. At a certain point, the materials reach their elastic limit. Concrete, while incredibly strong in compression, is brittle. When it is pulled or twisted beyond its limit, it doesn't bend, it snaps. Every time a new crack appears in this Chicago tower, it is a sign that the building is shedding its structural integrity. It is the building's way of saying that it can no longer hold itself up. The political fallout in Chicago has been intense. The city's building department is facing a barrage of questions about how the permits were issued in the first place. There are allegations that the third-party inspectors who signed off on the foundation were actually on the payroll of the developer's shell companies. This is a classic fox guarding the henhouse scenario that we see in so many failing megaprojects. When trillions of dollars are at stake in urban development, the lines between oversight and partnership become dangerously blurred. The result is a $1.8 billion monument to negligence that now sits as a potential hazard on the edge of the park. For those of you who love engineering, the remedy being discussed right now is truly mind-blowing. To truly save the building, they would have to perform an underpinning operation that is almost unprecedented for a skyscraper of this height. This involves digging beneath the existing foundation, while the building is occupied, to install new micropiles that reach the bedrock. It is essentially like performing open-heart surgery on a giant while he is running a marathon. The cost of this repair is estimated to be over $400 million. In many cases, it is actually cheaper to tear the building down and start over than it is to fix a fundamental foundation failure. But in Chicago, you can't just tear down a nearly brand new tower without causing a massive local economic depression. The situation has created an eerie atmosphere inside the building. Many of the lower floors are still occupied by businesses and residents who have nowhere else to go or are hoping for a legal settlement. They live in a space where they can literally see the structural stress of the building manifesting. Some offices have installed glass monitoring sensors that sound an alarm if the window frames move by more than a millimeter. Can you imagine trying to run a business or have an evening meal while a sensor is constantly reminding you that your 500-foot-tall home is shifting beneath your feet? It is the ultimate modern horror story for the elite. But why hasn't the city evacuated the building? This is where the legal battle becomes even more complicated. The city's engineers have reviewed the data, and while they admit there is accelerated settlement, they haven't yet declared it an imminent danger. This is a very specific legal term. As long as the building isn't literally falling down today, the city avoids the liability of displacing hundreds of people and taking on the developer's billionaire lawyers. So they wait. They watch the cracks, they measure the tilt. Everyone is holding their breath, waiting for the moment when the allowable becomes catastrophic. It is a game of structural chicken played with the Chicago skyline. The impact on the surrounding area is also a major concern. Because the building is shifting, it is putting pressure on the municipal water lines and the fiber optic cables that run beneath the street. There have already been 2 major water main breaks on the block that many people attribute to the building's movement. If the tower continues to settle unevenly, it could eventually shear the main gas lines or cause a collapse of the underground transit tunnels that run nearby. A failing megaproject doesn't just fail in a vacuum. It takes the surrounding infrastructure down with it. If you look at the drone footage of the upper floors, you can see the telltale signs of the stress. The glass curtain wall, which should be a perfectly flat surface, has ripples in it. This is because the frame of the building is no longer square. The glass panels are being squeezed, and as a result, they are bowing outward. This is a major safety hazard, as these panels can weigh over 1,000 pounds. If one of them fails and falls from the 80th floor, it becomes a projectile. This has led the city to install massive sidewalk sheds around the entire perimeter of the building, a sight that has become all too common in cities where skyscrapers are failing. The history of this project is a lesson in the dangers of pre-sales and aggressive financing. The developer needed to hit certain construction milestones to unlock the next round of funding from the banks. If they had stopped to fix the foundation issues when they were first discovered, they would have missed their deadlines and lost the funding, which would have ended the project then and there. So, they chose to keep going, gambling that they could hide the flaws until the building was finished and the responsibility was shifted to the condo owners and the insurance companies. It is a high-stakes version of hot potato. And now the potato has landed in the lap of the city of Chicago. What makes this tower especially tragic is that it was designed by some of the most brilliant minds in the world. The architectural renderings were stunning, and the interior finishes are some of the most expensive ever seen in the Midwest. But no amount of Italian marble or high-speed elevators can compensate for a foundation that isn't connected to the floor of the earth. It is a reminder that in architecture, as in life, integrity starts at the bottom. You can build as high as you want, but if your foundation is compromised, you are just building a very expensive monument to your own downfall. As we look toward the future, the Chicago Cracker, as some locals are starting to call it, will serve as a massive warning sign for future developments. The era of building super talls on soft clay with optimistic engineering reports is likely coming to an end. We are seeing a new wave of regulations that will require third-party, city-appointed foundation observers who are completely independent of the developers. But for the people involved in this $1.8 billion disaster, those regulations are coming far too late. There is also the human cost to consider, not just the wealthy investors, but the hundreds of construction workers, the architects, and the support staff who poured years of their lives into this project. To see your hard work literally cracking in front of you is a devastating blow. The pride of the Chicago building trades is legendary, and the fact that a building of this stature is failing under their watch is something that will be discussed in unions and engineering firms for decades. It is a blow to the spirit of the city that practically invented the modern skyscraper. In 2026, we are going to see a lot more of these stories. As our cities get denser and our buildings get taller, the margin for error becomes thinner than a sheet of paper. We are pushing the limits of materials and the limits of the earth. This Chicago Tower is a case study in what happens when those limits are ignored in favor of a balance sheet. It is proof that $1 billion can buy a lot of things, but it cannot buy its way out of the fundamental laws of gravity and geology. So, the next time you are walking through a major city and you see a beautiful new skyscraper reaching for the stars, take a moment to look at the ground. Think about the hundreds of feet of steel and concrete that you can't see, the hidden foundation that makes it all possible. And remember the story of the $1.8 billion Chicago Tower that forgot that the most important part of reaching for the heavens is staying grounded in the bedrock. The cracks in the walls are just the beginning. The real story is in the earth that refuses to hold the weight of our hubris. As the sun sets over Lake Michigan, the lights of the failing tower flicker on, one floor at a time. To the tourists on the Navy Pier, it looks like a beacon of success. But to those who know the truth, it is a ticking clock, a giant of glass and steel that is slowly being defeated by the very soil it tried to conquer. We will be watching closely to see if the planned $400 million rescue mission actually happens, or if this tower becomes the most expensive controlled demolition in history. Either way, the Chicago Cracker will remain a permanent part of engineering lore, a billion-dollar lesson that should have never been taught. The silence in the lobby, the popping of the marble, and the groaning of the steel under the Chicago wind tell a story that no developer wants to hear. It is the story of a mega-project that failed long before the first ribbon was cut. It is a tragedy of errors, a comedy of hubris, and a structural miracle that it is still standing at all. For the viewers of failing mega-projects, this is the gold standard of what not to do. Keep your eyes on Chicago, because this story is far from over, and the next crack might be the one that finally breaks the silence of the city for good. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the crumbling foundation of one of the world's most expensive mistakes.